through. And as Mike said, that were still issues at the last board meeting. So we have worked through all of those issues, and they are highlighted in yellow. So that's why they jump out in this agreement to you. A couple of them was, and the first of which is one that's going to be addressed in the condominium declarations and will be addressed in the subsequent development agreement and is in this agreement as well. And that is that 80% of the units will remain as owner occupied and up to 20% would be able to be rental units. We clarified that this would be for the total number of units that are proposed in the development, which is 28. And so at any point in time, he could have up to 20% that would be rental. The rest would have to be owner occupied. So again, that is clarified here, and it's actually going to appear in a couple of other places as well, and even in more detail as we get to the next development agreement and the condominium declarations. There was some question with respect to the retainage or the 15% warranty. We worked through all of those issues, and that is more clearly explained in the development agreement. We worked through also the drawdown procedure, and possibly Rocco can address some of those points. We actually did get a little bit of tweaking from the attorney today, and I believe that those last comments that were made by our attorney, that there would not be an issue with the developer or his attorney, but we did need to do a little bit more tweaking with respect to that. There was some clarification with respect to the fees, and they have in fact paid some of those fees initially, and some of those fees will be set forth in the letter of credit that's being posted by the developer. The developer has also submitted the remediation plan, as well as the raising permit, and all of those documents are now in-house as well. I'm not sure if there are other specific questions, otherwise I'll have Rocco talk about the bond process or procedure as part of this agreement.
Rocco, if you talk about that, but also the other issue that we focused on our last meeting was the modifying the build out of the development. Before we were had 2 units 1 year and 2 units, I believe, the second year, and we changed that in order to address the concerns that help us create that 8%, 20% owner occupied. Rocco?
One of the concerns in this real estate market and with the development process of that property, as the original project plan suggested, and when we entered into this process early on, we were indicating a plan on constructing 2 buildings in each of the first 2 years, which would get a certain amount of value online relatively quickly, and the increments then begin paying off the bonds. In other words, in effect, cutting into the amount of interest that the TID would be paying. The developer had a concern about his ability to construct and market and sell these units in a timely fashion, as the pro forma suggested. So what we did is we retained the interest rate as in the project plan, and made an allowance for the ability to construct 1 building per year for each of the years, 7 units per year. But we implemented a backstop to the bond process in which the TID would dissolve after a 20-year period. So effectively, it provides him the capability in a slow market, if that were to be the case, to construct buildings 1 at a time on an annual basis, or if the market is robust enough to improve them in a faster fashion. Associated with that was the type of bond. Before we referred to it as a developer bond, but for more specific, we decided to get more specific, and we're calling it, they call it a developer, it's a drawdown bond, whereas the village will authorize payments of the bond on as needed basis, as shown by the developer in his progress in implementing the development. So as time goes forth, and most of this bond, the $750,365 maximum of the bond, will for the most part be used before June or July of 2008. But as this cleanup process and as the demolition process goes forward, the developer will provide the village specific criteria, invoices, and documentations as to the actual costs, and the village will authorize the delivery of the bonds in an incremental drawdown fashion, rather than a lump sum up front.
And again, those bonds are retired by the increments that are generated down the road. As Rocco indicated, one of the increments don't come in as fast if the developer chooses to build the building slowly over 4 years. If the principal is not completely repaid at 20 years, then that money is lost. If the market takes off and does really well, developers, he's the opportunity to get it paid off sooner, everybody's ahead, and is okay. So the fact that we're saying that the buildings can be started over 1 year doesn't mean that they're required to start it that way. If the market warrants earlier starts, they have the flexibility to do that, limiting their exposure. But we felt it was important to put a fixed limit on the amount of years that the TIF would stay out. We were allowed, the district is allowed to go 27 years, at least 27.
That's correct.
And that doesn't mean it needs to go out there. This is not an industrial project. This is a redevelopment project of a blighted area. It's residential. 20 years, we believe, is a reasonable limit on the cost benefit for what the community receives. So we will no longer do that.
Then we keep in mind, the most probable development plan would be building one building the first year. It would be difficult to get 2 up in the first year. Most likely 2 will be constructed the second year and 1 in the fourth. But the other thing to keep in mind is that through the TID process, the developer is reimbursed only the amount of the increment, regardless of how well or what the economy is like. There is a limit to the value of these buildings, and there are constraints up front, how fast they can develop or how slow they need to be developed. But once they're fully developed, the increment is the increment, and there is no other money that's going to be forwarded to him, only the increment, or only the taxes generated by the increment.
Compared to where we were a couple of weeks ago and to where we're at tonight, whoever gets the credit for this nice piece of work, and the developers obviously on board with this.
Yeah, Gene and Robert did a good job of working this thing through, and along with the developer and Jonah Hetland from his staff. And everybody found a way to make this thing work from their standpoint, which it has to. They're making the investment, and from the public side, the village is protected, and we're eliminating
Nice piece of work, Gina and Rocco both, and Mike, I'm sure you had your hand in it as well.
So we'd be looking for a motion to approve the development agreement between the Village of Pleasant Prairie and BFU.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Clyde. Any other discussion on this item?
I'd love to move here.
Steve?
I'd love that it's moving ahead.
Well, I think it's important we get that cleaned up over there, so.
Definitely.
Aye.
I actually thought